Welcome to Tech Marketing Trends, the podcast where we delve into the strategies, experiences, and insights that shape the dynamic world of sales and marketing in the tech sector. I'm your host, Jacob Lowenbrand, and I'm the CEO of Bright Vision. And in today's episode, we're diving into the fascinating world of body language, exploring how nonverbal cues can make or break our efforts to connect, communicate effectively, and lead with confidence. And joining us to talk about this is a master of nonverbal communication, David Schneer, who's the CEO and body language master trainer at the Merrill Institute. And David has dedicated his career to understanding the nuances of nonverbal communication, from the subtle signals we send with our posture and gestures and the powerful impact of our facial expressions. So I'll let you introduce yourself. So without further ado, let's welcome David Schneer to the Power of Nonverbal Communication episode. David, it's an honor to have you with us here today.
Thank you. I'm excited to do this and very grateful that you invited me.
Yeah, and I'm so happy you accepted. So I'm excited about you giving us your short or a short background story and what you're up to. And you have done a lot of stuff in your career. So yeah, would be interesting to hear a little bit more about that for our listeners as well.
So, as we were getting to know each other before this session, I mentioned to you that I do several things. The main thing that I do is I run a company called Merrill Research, and that's a company that was formed in 1986 to basically help uh, mostly very large companies bring new products to market and to hone their strategic communications, like their marketing, their branding, their naming, their logos. We basically evaluate ideas, whether it's products or messages, and uh, we're often put in a position to have to tell somebody that their baby is ugly. And when we conduct this research, one of the things that makes us unique is that we not only conduct qualitative research, but we use nonverbal analysis in our interviewing, not only to encourage respondents to speak, to really try and understand what it is they're telling us. And I can been doing this long enough, Jacob, to tell you that most of the time when I'm talking to folks, what comes out of their mouth is not what their body's saying. And so while I'm conducting this research, I formed the Merrill Institute for nonverbal intelligence to um, train people in the techniques that I use in my practice and research. So really, the research and the body language go hand in hand. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. Fantastic. And uh, so let's start there and continue on that track there because I think it would be interesting to just understand a little bit about yeah your experiences and some background that actually led you to specialize in the field of nonverbal communication and so forth.
Well, if you look at my LinkedIn profile, you'll see I've been around a long time. And, I started off my career as a journalist, okay, for the Los Angeles Times. And that really started my career in observation. I then went on to not only, do journalism, but I then went to study literature at Cal. And one thing was pretty clear with me is that I could research and I could write. And that parlayed itself into a research career at Regis McKenna. And when I started researching back then and talking to people, I really began to notice that their bodies were telling me something very different. And kind of like a lawyer might, I have a sixth sense about people. Okay. But it wasn't until a couple decades ago I began to study nonverbal intelligence. Now I could not only identify what it was I was seeing, but also teach people that as well. And it's just having been around people and conducted thousands of interviews and focus groups all over the world
Hmm.
that had led me to a unique position, really, where we're conducting research and we're also analyzing the body, even when we're talking on Zoom. Right
Hmm.
now, I
Hmm.
can begin to see a whole host of things about you that the untrained eye might not.
Exactly. Super interesting, and especially especially when we now are conducting so many meetings over Zoom or Teams or whatever virtual platforms we're working on. So if we dive
Right.
into that a little bit, in your experience, what are the key nonverbal cues that people should pay attention to in order to read others' intentions or feelings more accurately? Can you give us a little bit of an introduction there?
Yeah, you might be surprised at my answer, but actually, the most honest part of the body is the feet. The
Feet.
feet,
Okay.
the feet, the feet are always pointed in the direction that the body wants to go.
Uh-huh.
And so when you get an opportunity to meet with people, you want to check out the position of their feet. If their feet are pointed right at you, that's generally a good sign. If the feet are askew and pointed toward the door or an exit, it's an indication they may be uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Um, Certainly, there's a lot to be said for um, the way a person uses their hands or not. Okay. Um, the thumb is a very reliable indicator of the level of confidence that somebody has. When the thumb is out, they're very confident. But if you start to talk to somebody, Jacob, and they close their thumbs like this, it's an indication that they're disagreeing or they're not, something's not right. Okay. You're not quite sure what it is. That's your job, is to find that out. Right.
Hmm.
But that's a telltale indication. When you're talking with somebody and all of a sudden they begin to tilt their head, that's a really good sign. That means they're highly engaged. So these subtle nuances these are things you'll begin to see as I help identify them. Another thing you're going to see, and I guarantee you'll see this when we're done with this session, but contempt. Contempt is part of one of the 7 micro expressions that you'll see on somebody's face. And those 7 micro expressions are uh, joy and happiness, fear, disgust, surprise, anger, happiness. I said that, I think. Um, there's a neutral position, right? And then contempt.
Hmm.
Contempt is an asymmetrical smile. It looks like this.
Hmm.
Okay. If you have teenagers or kids, you will see them do this. What this means is one of 2 things. It either means that they completely disagree with what you're saying, or they're feeling superior to you.
Mm-hmm.
But those are some of the main things that you'll see. There's oh, thousands upon thousands of facial muscles that contract. You get that boiled down to 7, and it's, if you're human, you're going to show these 7 emotions. And by the way, you cannot control these emotions. Okay. These are involuntary outbursts or leakage of emotions.
Hmm.
Uh, and uh, we also train to look at the face. But, the face is also a place where people can lie and feign, right? When I was growing up, my folks would say, wipe that smile off your face, or pretend that you're happy to go see your uncle, that kind of stuff. And so we learn how to, you know, contort our face so that we hide our emotions. That's why we want to concentrate on the lower part of the body and see if somebody's leaning in because we lean into things we like, or lean away from things we don't like. So I don't know, Jacob, we could go on for hours and hours. I teach about 100 body language positions and interpretations, but some of the folks that have trained me, they have databases of 500-600 different types of uh, body movements that only very highly trained people would be able to do this. There's only a handful of people that could do this, identify those.
Fantastic. Yeah. I suppose we can find the highly trained ones in maybe interrogation or police situation, things like that, as well as poker players, I suppose. But for us who is in sales or marketing or leadership and really want to think about how we come across or build rapport and all that, how can individuals become more aware of their own nonverbal signals and use this to improve their personal and professional communication, would you say?
You know, that's precisely what happens when you study the nonverbal behavior of others. You begin to realize what you yourself are doing.
Mm.
Okay. And so the best way to do that is to pick up material. There's a lot of stuff on the internet, a lot of stuff on my website on things you want to do when you're talking to somebody. For example, you want to be able to put your hands together in what is called a steeple and talk with a steeple, because studies have shown that people who talk like this appear symmetrical. And when you appear symmetrical, you also appear more confident. And when you appear more confident, you are also more credible. Okay, so learn to blade, or you can do a half blade if you want, right? Another effective technique coming right out of Silicon Valley was Steve Jobs. If you ever saw him speak
Yeah.
rather, he did a thing that body language experts called holding the ball. And so he would speak, and he often had like some sort of device in his hand to move his image that he was talking in front of. But he would put his hands together, and they called it holding the ball. And what that does is it helps to give your words concrete form when they come out of your mouth. Former President Bill Clinton had a similar gesture. They called it the Clinton box. He used to talk and move his hands like this. Okay. Now, he was trained to do that because when he was Arkansas governor before he became president, he was horrific with his hands all over the place. And the point here is basically you want two things, Jacob. You want symmetry and you want smoothness. Okay. You want to get those hands spread apart, out wide, and use them. You don't have to tell Italians this, right? They just do
Oh,
this.
yeah.
A lot of it's cultural, right?
Fantastic.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. So interesting. And I suppose there's a lot of those tricks and cues that you can use there. And now we're in virtual meetings, and we're, yeah, as we always see from the chest and upwards here and so forth. There are less variables you can both read and use in your expression in order to come across as whatever you like to come across as. What's your tip for us working in a remote situation mostly?
Well, it's definitely more difficult. And sometimes you're up against people who do not have good camera hygiene,
Mm,
shall
yeah.
we say. Like, for example, I can see you clearly and I can see your chest. I haven't seen your hands, but
Mm,
that's okay. But you know, it'd be far better if we were in person. I'd get more data points to work with, right?
yeah.
But we're not. And so That doesn't mean, however, that I can't read or listen to what you're saying. For example, let's talk about the shoulders. Oftentimes you ask somebody a question and they don't know, and they'll say, I don't know.
Yeah.
That's a symmetrical shrug. Okay. That's an indication that they really don't know. Okay. Now, when there's asymmetry, and you'll see this, you ask somebody a question and they say they don't know, and they lift one shoulder, chances are they do know and they just don't want to tell you. So you got to dig a little deeper. And you can
That's
see it very
interesting.
visibly.
Yeah.
Or somebody's head begins to sink into their shoulders. It just seems like they're taking on what looks to be like a turtle. And that's what they call it. They call it the turtle. That's a highly reliable indicator that somebody's losing confidence. Or blading, turning away. All right. Leaning back.
Hmm.
Those are all signs that they're not liking what you're saying. We blade away, we turn away, we lean away from things we don't like. We lean into things we like, right? So those are some basics. Uh, One of my mentors, ex-FBI, Joe Navarro, uh, he is somebody you should pick up a book and read what everybody says. And you might even want to have him on your show. Tell him I sent you. Great guy. You want to sometimes watch TV with the sound off because you'll be able to see actors, highly trained actors, by the way, some of whom can fake these expressions. Uh, but you'll get a sense of listening with your eyes when you turn, the sound off. All right. And then, um, you know, practice a lot of the things. Mirroring is one of the greatest things you can do when you're sitting with somebody and they lean in, you lean in. If they lean back, you lean back. What that does is it creates psychological comfort. And that's what we're all about, Jacob, is comfort, feeling comfortable. All right.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. Really good.
So if, let's say, you're a negotiator,
Hmm.
you would like to have in your negotiating room a glass table and swivel chairs. And the reason being is you want to be able to see those lower extremities, and you want to be able to see people when they
Yeah.
squirm in their seat.
That's a good
So
negotiation setup.
it is. It is. And then, I could go on and on and on with um, the things that with Zoom, you don't want to be too close. We see people do that. We
Mm.
see people who, uh, have a camera that, basically catches this. And so there's
Yeah.
all sorts of things that you want to make sure you don't
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
in Zoom. And also the voice
Mm.
and cathartic exhale. Like
Mm.
if you're in a meeting and you hear, that's a stress reliever. So there's all sorts of things on Zoom you can pick up. Some of these cameras are 4K and they're pretty unforgiving. So they can, sometimes when you speak, Jacob, I can see the pupils on your eyes. And that also tells me something. Like the wider your pupils are, the more engaged you are.
Uh-huh.
Why? Because you really like what you're seeing and you want more of it.
Hmm. So
And
interesting.
you cannot control that.
Wow.
Yeah.
So much I didn't know. But if we take one really usual situation is, of course, job interviews. And I'm thinking of myself hiring somebody here. And, people puff their CVs a little bit and maybe over exaggerates a little bit of their things like that. What are the cues an interviewer or a person looking for, is this a trustworthy person that I'm dealing with here? Is there any like top
That's it.
5 tips there?
I can give you some top five for sure. That's a great point. because the cost of a wrong hire is about, to fix that,
Yeah.
is about 30% of the person's salary. So when you make a wrong hire, that's what happens.
Yeah.
You can never really tell when somebody is lying. You just can't.
Mm.
There is a whole science and deception theory, and it's very difficult to tell when somebody's lying for two reasons. One is research has shown that we humans are really poor lie detectors. And also, many of us are really good liars. And you put that combination together and you get people who want to trust. You know,
Yeah.
we want to trust, we want to give people the benefit of the doubt. And unfortunately, it gets used against us. So I want you to, most lies get caught in a confession or when irrefutable evidence pops up. Rarely do these lies get caught in real time. So let's just debunk that myth. But what we can tell you is looking for comfort or discomfort. So you talk to a candidate and all of a sudden you see the hand shaking, if you can see that. Okay, that's a reliable indicator that they may not be as confident about this position as they're letting on. Okay. The other thing to look for again is leaning in. Are they leaning in uh, when you ask them a question about their previous employer and their satisfaction, and they look askance and they turn and come back? That's a red flag. Okay, looking askance, red flag. Shaking is a red flag. Now you got two red flags. Okay. Oftentimes, when somebody is articulate and then they begin to stammer and stutter, red flag number three. Okay. Also, if you can see again about the hands are extremely important. They're dead giveaways. You're talking to somebody and they're doing this. If they're creating what looks like friction between their knuckles, what they're really doing is trying to soothe away the stress that this interview is causing them. That's four red flags.
Yeah.
Uh, and you want to be able to look at the face and see their eye engagement. Are they smiling? Now, the smile, there's lots of smiles, okay? But the two most recognized ones are the social smile, which is just a nod that says, I recognize you, I mean you no harm, I'm on my way. And then there's a genuine smile that includes the eyes. And there's a scientific reason why they include the eyes, because these two muscles are connected. So when you see a candidate that's exercising a smile, that's raising their eyebrows when they talk, they have just that personality that brings you in, that's a good sign. Okay. But if you're doing the opposite of that, that's red flag number 5. Now, I could go on with red flags if you're sitting in person. Okay. Remember the, um, but if you're not, if you're on a Zoom interview, you know, the single lift of the shoulder would be an indication of incongruence between what just came out of the mouth and the body going, wait a minute, I don't agree with that. So basically what we're looking for is comfort versus discomfort. Okay.
So interesting. Yeah. And I heard a seasoned recruiter say that he typically have, as you say, people are can be quite good at hiding this by controlling themselves and things like that. So he tried to interview them in an unexpected way, maybe in the cafeteria instead of a conference room. The conference room is quite easy to control. Is that something you have experienced? It's easier to get them a little bit off cue or something like that, and they become more their self.
Oh, it's all about comfort. You know, most of the time, I'm interviewing people like this in this format. In fact,
Mm.
later today, while you're asleep, I will have an interview with a very technical respondent, trying to see if they emote like the rest of us do. And so, in this venue, I've got to make people feel comfortable. But most of the time, pre-COVID, and now getting back to it, I go into these research labs and facilities where I invite people in, and it's all about making them comfortable, making sure the temperature is good, making sure they have food or water, making sure they have a good seat. Sometimes we'll ask people in advance, what do you like to drink? No, I like Diet Pepsi. Bam, we'll make sure that's available. It's all about comfort. There's been numerous studies, Jacob, that have shown if you have two gas stations on opposite sides of the road, okay, and you have one gas station that's very poorly lit with very, very cheap prices, and on the other side of the road, you have a gas station that is extremely brightly lit and has very high prices, guess where people are going to shop?
I suppose the light attracts them.
Yeah, overwhelmingly. And that is because of the comfort. That's why you go to the same restaurant that you do over and over again, because you just like it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And it's all about that. And once you can establish comfort, when you're sitting with somebody, you begin to mirror with them, like I just told you. Um, if they blade, you blade. If they cross their legs, you cross their legs. You cross your legs. All these techniques work together to make somebody comfortable, because I guarantee you, you will not get anything out of anybody when they are in psychological distress.
Hmm.
Just not. That's why you really want to treat your employees like they matter,
Yeah,
because they're not going
exactly.
to perform in toxic situations.
No, fantastic.
We saw that, right?
Yeah, exactly. And if we turn the situation around, and instead, I'm meeting clients, I'm trying to get them to understand why they should engage with us and all that, sales pitching and presenting, and trying to map our abilities to their problems and things like that, just like every company do. What's your tips there uh, on creating rapport and trust as fast as possible in a situation like that?
You got to make it all about them.
Mm.
As soon as you make it about you, you're done. And so, if you're meeting somebody personally, you really need to get the handshake down. And there's a specific way to do it and a specific way not to do it. Handshakes are cultural, they're different. They differ from state to state in the
Right.
US, and they differ
Mm.
from country to country all over the world. Okay. And so you first of all, you need to have a clue about this. Okay. There's some gestures you just don't want to use in the Middle East. Okay. And you need to recognize that when you go to the Middle East, you know, and you open up your briefcase and you whip out the contract and you start to get down to the nitty gritty, they're not gonna take that seriously. They're not. That's the wrong thing to do. What they want to do is they want to take a walk with you somewhere, holding your hand, talking about your family to see what kind of man you are or woman you are. Okay. Uh, Mostly in men in the Middle East, obviously you wouldn't do that unless you're related to somebody, but uh, it it matters. Okay, the handshake matters. Secondly, is smile. Lift your eyes and smile. That connotes sincerity. Okay, you could do that a little more. Smile and open
Yeah.
up. Yeah, you got a nice smile, but and you want to make sure that the distance between you is appropriate if you're in person. Okay. There's a social band and it differs by country. In Latin America, they're all rubbing up against each other. In England, not so much, right? In the UK, it's different, you know. Um, knowing the culture and knowing a lot about the person, being prepared and being to ask them about themselves is the best way to get someone to talk to you and to like you.
Hmm.
I mean, there's tons of other stuff you can do, Jacob. I don't know how much time you have, but I literally have about 40 hours of content on
Yeah,
this stuff.
exactly. Yeah. Well, we have to refer them to your courses and workshops if they really want to dive into it. But that's really interesting. Yeah, and I expect that very few sell people have actually studied it in that detail, so they know what kind of handshake should I go in for in this meeting and things like that. But yeah, it's the
This would be
detail.
extremely valuable in sales,
Hmm.
extremely valuable in HR. I'm always amazed at why I don't see more body language practitioners on resumes of HR people. Can you imagine how powerful that would be?
Yeah, exactly.
Um,
If they can reduce the misfit tires or whatever they call it, with 20%, that would be a huge amount of money for any
yeah,
company.
yeah, and let's be honest. That narcissists and sociopaths sneak into these companies. They're really smart and adaptable, and you're not going to miss them all or get them all. But uh, I think there's another level that sneaks in that are so obvious that a trained eye would be, wary of that. So
Definitely. And that's so interesting. And can you give an example or share an experience when a nonverbal communication made a significant difference in either a personal or professional situation? Do you have any?
sure. Oh yeah, this is a great one. It's one of my favorites. I was conducting interviews amongst dealers who resell the printers at one of my largest clients manufacturers. Okay, you would know this client if I mentioned their name. They're a household name. And so we this client that manufacture printers sells their printers through dealers. Okay, and then they have a line that they sell on Amazon and in other stores, but they have this channel through dealers. And we were trying to understand what is the best channel strategy for my client. And so we did about 30 interviews and we talked to 10 value added resellers and dealers in LA, New York, Chicago. And I remember hearing negative comments about one of my client's competitors. Everywhere we went, there was something negative about it. So we began to chase this down. And we asked one VAR, we said, you sell other printers other than my clients, right? And he said, yeah. And I said, well, are all the channel programs from these manufacturers the same, or do some do a better job than others? And he goes, oh, no, some do a better job than others. And right then and there, I just said, Acme. I didn't ask him a question. I just threw out the name of the printer manufacturer. It wasn't Acme, but I threw that name out because if I had asked him, what do you think about Acme? I would have given him time to think for an answer. But I just posited a presupposition. I said, Acme. And he reeled back, showed me a sign of disgust, contempt. And when when he came back, he said, oh, they're okay. And I said, well, I don't know. Something tells me something about Acme just not right with you. Am I right? And he leans back and he sighs. He goes, Yeah, Acme, man, everybody knows them. I don't have to spend money to advertise them, but I'll never do business with them again because they broke deal registration. And what that means, Jacob, is that this VAR wanted to sell 50 of Acme's printers to their customer. Acme cut him out, went around directly to the customer.
Ah,
Had a lesser trained moderator heard that, they would have believed just what came out of the mouth. But we knew that something was up, and it was a significant finding because my client was doing the same thing, violating deal registration, and that had to stop. And that's critical. And I could go on and on with examples like that, but there's all sorts of techniques that you can use to get people to emote, and that's what we do.
yeah, thank you for that example. Really, really interesting. And you have shared so much here with us, so thank you for that. So any final comment on, people who are interested to learn more about this, or where they can find more content about nonverbal communication, or maybe check out your stuff, where can they go and where can they read up on these things?
Well, they definitely need to go to Joe Navarro. He's a good guy. He trained me among other people. And there's a lot to be learned from him. Please tell him I sent you. They can definitely come to the merrillinstitute.com or merrillresearch.com. We've kind of blended the companies together because there's such a marriage between research and body language, and also AI. We're now using AI to back me up
Mm.
in my interviews. So now we have a sense of fault tolerance,
Hmm.
if you're
Wow.
familiar with that phrase, right?
Yeah, somewhat.
Um, well, fault tolerance is used in the computing industry for redundancy and high availability. It means if one system goes down, there's another to take its place. In early England, in the financial world, they would say we need belt and braces for this deal, meaning pants with belt and suspenders to keep your pants up. It was just another way to make sure the deal was safe. Well, we're doing that in qualitative research by having AI algorithms that are trained to identify facial micro expressions like I'm trained to do, backing me up. That's
Hmm.
powerful.
Yeah. Oh, awesome. Okay, so let's go to merrillinstitute.com and check your content out there. And I suppose you are contactable on LinkedIn as well.
Oh yeah, I'm all over LinkedIn, and please direct message me. And it's a whole new world. It's like learning a new language,
Yeah, really.
and it really is. And it's a language that is super important. Most communication is nonverbal,
Yeah.
and you need to be fluent to
Wow.
get around, especially these days, right? When the truth
Yeah.
is
Hard to,
being
yeah,
assaulted.
exactly. David, I've learned so much. This was super interesting, and I didn't know there was so much to it with nonverbal communication, but I'm really intrigued to study this area more. And to be honest, I put way too little emphasis on that or knowing this area in my daily work. So thank you so much for inspiring me. I'm sure you have inspired every listener as well to dive more
Well,
into this area.